continuing on. I doubt we're going to finish with Abraham tonight. If we do not, we should next week. So tonight, chapter 22 of Genesis is a fairly well-known account. Once again, one of those accounts, or as what many people call it, as stories in the Bible, but something I have really gleaned and learned off of a pastor is the fact that truly story tends to, when you think of a story, what does that imply? Fiction. Right, it's not true. Whereas everything in the Bible is true. With that being said, though, there are some places in Jesus' teaching, do not forget, that technically would be stories. They are things that Jesus used as a picture, as an example. But you would notice that doesn't name names, and it's a good example, but not to teach someone about what he's trying to teach them, something they would relate to, but it's not necessarily a true story. It wasn't necessarily something that absolutely happened just in that way. But anyway, so...
Actually, story is a style of telling it. It's not really, it can be a true story or a fiction story.
Right, but
the word story actually means a style. It has to go a certain flow.
Right. It's just, what the average person, though, when they think of story, nowadays, the average person...
Not me.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's not everybody. The average person, yeah. But no, the average person, when they hear the words...
Yes.
When they hear story, it's...
It's just a story.
It's a story, it's like, sort of a thing. But anyway, so what we are going to be starting out looking at tonight is the ultimate test to, many people go and say, it's the ultimate test to Abraham's faith. Mm-hmm. However, it goes a little bit beyond that. And it's also the ultimate test of Isaac's faith as well. Many people tend to miss that, and I will, when we get there, which will be fairly soon, I'll explain a little bit more on that and why it is we should be considering the amount of faith that Isaac would have had to have at this point. Let's just start reading right in verse 1 of chapter 22. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up, and went unto the place of which God had told them. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off. I'm going to stop right there for a quick second as we just go over these first few verses here. So right away, now when we think of the word tempt, okay, that is typically, we always relate that to bad, temptation. It's of the devil, not necessarily all the time. This tempting here was more of a testing than a tempting. And this word tempt here that is used here is, you notice, whatever, this is not part of God's words, okay? What God said was Abraham, he called him out, okay? This word tempt was put in here by the author, the one who penned it. So this would have been, even though everything is God breathed, laid on to the writers by the Holy Spirit, it's still written in the way that that person would have written, with the way that person spoke themselves. So the way that that person may have used the word tempt could mean testing here. And that is what we see, because there is certainly no, it's not something where God is trying to get Abraham to sin. Okay, he's not saying, okay, my goal here is to take this man who says he has faith in me, and I am going to get him to sin just to prove him wrong. That no, he doesn't. No, okay, that's not what we are seeing here. But I do want to point out, though, is that immediately when God calls out to Abraham, what does Abraham say? I'm here. What does that mean? He was listening. Okay, he was listening. If you are, that right there, just right off the bat, speaks at least a little bit, okay, to his faith, to his relationship with God. If he did not have a good relationship with God, would he have been listening? It may have taken a couple times for him to even say, realize. If you think of young Samuel, now with Samuel, it was, with him, it was just, he was a young boy. He did not understand it yet, but he knew he heard a voice calling to him. He didn't know who it was coming from or where it was coming from. And in the end, it was the prophet Eli that had told him, that's God speaking to you. And it's that sort of situation we see here. Abraham had no doubt at all who it was that was speaking to him. And then verse 2, God says, take now thy son, thine only son, Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I tell thee of. So there's two critical things to contemplate or to think about or to realize that are in this verse. It's first of all, remember, we're going to look at this a little bit later, about part of the covenant. Okay? A part of the Abrahamic covenant was that that Abraham's line would continue on. It would become a great nation. Okay, so that being the case, how would he offer? Why would God tell him to offer Isaac? I mean, as just going off of if I was in Abraham's shoes as a father, just okay. Well, how's that going to work, God? I mean, I know you're all powerful, but how's that going to work? Well, then another thing to think about here is, first of all, that some may consider thy only son Isaac. Who's Ishmael? Ishmael is his son. The reason why it says thy only son Isaac is because Isaac was the only one who was the one that was a part of that covenant. Ishmael was not. Remember, Ishmael was born out of sin. Now Ishmael still had a blessing on him. Okay, we learned, or we were reminded of that and learned more about that last week. However, he was not a part of what we call the Abrahamic covenant. Okay, so when we are looking at these, God goes and tells Abraham to do this, what we would consider this absolutely ridiculous thing to do, this crazy thing to do. Does it say that Abraham tried to reason with God? Did he try and question God? Like I just said, if it was me, I may have gone and said, well, God, are you sure? You thinking this through? I mean, you always come through with your promises, and you promise this. How are you going to do it? There was nothing like that. Instead, it says, verse 3, Abraham rose up early in the morning, that next morning, up early, to go and do it. He took a couple of young men with him, with him and Isaac, most likely just to help with the burden and help, just help with the travel, essentially, okay? Just a couple servants to help him along. Why? Because this was actually a long journey. They were not just, it was not just a simple couple-hour drive away, okay? First of all, remember, if they were doing any driving, it would have been on a donkey.
Yeah.
Who knows much about donkeys? Well, you know what? I was going to say, they go when they want, and that's usually at a very slow pace. It says in verse 4, on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. They started out early in the morning, and on the third day of traveling, they could see it afar off. It's not that they arrived there right then. That's when they could see it a long ways off. So they may not have even gotten there till possibly the fourth day. But that's when he saw it afar off, was on the third day. Then picking up in verse 5, Abraham said to his young men, abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again unto you. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. Now, so the first thing that we see here is while they're still afar off, he has the two young men stay. Now, that could be for a multitude of reasons. However, one good reason of that is quite possibly these two that he would have brought were possibly not just well trusted, but would have been possibly very close friends, or people, or these men would have been possibly very protective of Isaac. So in other words, he did not want the possibility of someone interfering with what God had called him to do. So that's why he would have left those two behind. And he took all of the things that were needed for a sacrifice, except one thing. And Isaac saw that. Verse 7, Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, my father. He said, here, my son. He said, behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went, both of them, together. So at this point, this is when it starts to test Isaac's faith. Because when they left home, it very well could have been that they were, he may not have known exactly what the trip was about. However, at this point, he's just like, oh, okay, we're going to worship. We have fire, we have wood. Okay, we're going to do a sacrifice. But wait a second. I've been around long enough. I have been a part of many sacrifices with my father. There is something critical missing here. And it's got to be hard at this point too, not just right from the beginning, but I mean even more here for Abraham as well. Because now he's very much more committed. Just him and Isaac now heading towards to be able to hike up to that spot on the mountain, Mount Moriah, where God had told him to do it. And even his son is starting to call him out on it. But what does Abraham in his faith say? God will provide. Now think about this. Where are they going? They're going up on a mountain where there could be very much a mountain goat or something like that. But how is it? What's the possibility of it being without blemish What's the possibility of it not have, if it was a if it was a ram, knocking two rams, what do they like to do? Like to knock heads together. Quick little thing. I saw a little video clip the other day, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can see Penelope doing that. These people have a younger ram, and their son puts on a football helmet, and their young son, and the ram and him are just going at it, butting heads, and just Penelope. I can see Penelope doing that. But anyways, what is going to come of it? This ram, this animal doing that, could very well injure itself, cause something to where it would then not be perfect. However, as we can see here, Abraham says, I'm going to add a little bit to it. I don't know how God's going to do it, but God will provide. God will provide the lamb that is needed. Now, this can go, just for the study that we're doing, we won't go there, but this can go much deeper in this, and that is prophesying and talking about God sending his son Jesus to this earth as our sacrificial lamb for us. Oh gosh, where were we? Verse 9. They came to the place where God told them of. Abraham built an altar there, laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. Now this is when we truly come to the place of the real test of Isaac's faith. Now, growing up and in many different instances, we tend to hear of Isaac as being this younger boy. However, we don't know exactly how old he is. Going off of the original Hebrew, you think, you could tell exactly, but it all had to do with the term that they would use to call a young man had to do more with maturity than it did age. So but what it could be, the youngest instance for this that is seen in the Bible, at least, for the I believe from right is Na'ar, is what his son, that son in the original Hebrew would put him anywhere between 17 and I believe it's 34. Okay, so anywhere in that age bracket there, even though he was would have been at least a young man as we know it, even though he was the son of a rich man, that did not make him a little sissy, one with soft hands, as we might call it. And we know that for one reason, says in verse 6, Abraham took the wood and laid it upon Isaac his son. While we go on this hike, Isaac, you've got to carry all this firewood. What would that tell you? Isaac was rugged. Okay? He very well could have said, when Abraham said, Isaac, now let me tie up your hands. He was bound. Let me tie up your hands, tie up your feet. Isaac very well could have said, oh, no, you've lost it, Dad. No, I'm drawing the line there. What does he do? Being that he allowed Abraham to do it, what does that say? It's just like, you know what's best, Father. We can see that in Jesus, the example of Jesus with God the Father as well, right? Mm-hmm. Father, if this cup can pass from me, but not my will, but thine be done. Yeah. You know what's best. I will let you do this. Look at the faith. No matter if he was 17 or in his mid-30s. Look at the amount of faith he had at that point to allow his father to bound him and lay him on that sacrificial altar. That sacrificial altar that he helped build, on top of that, that firewood that he just carried up the mountain, he allowed his Father to do that.
And is that like Jesus carrying the cross? Is that a symbol of that?
Absolutely. I believe it is, yes. There's many different things that you can see throughout this account that very easily tie in and relate to the whole, to the Jesus being our sacrificial lamb, to that, to the crucifixion and everything that led up to it.
That gave his only begotten Son.
Yep, we'll see, and only begotten Son with Jesus, and you look at Isaac. Isaac was supposed to be, in God's plan, at least at this point, Isaac's only son. And that is why, because Ishmael was born out of sin. Ishmael was not a God-provided child, a God-provided son. Okay?
One was a child of promise and the other one was a child of...
It was a child of sin. Yeah, it was a child of sin. Yep, Ishmael was a child of sin. Born out of sin. Yep. Because of unbelief and lack of faith. And other things you could all put in there with that. That is why Ishmael was born. And then it goes even further. You see, so we just finished reading verse 9. Isaac is laying bound on the altar. Abraham at this point, you might think as a parent ourselves, I think everyone, to my knowledge in here, is a parent, would think that, okay, at this point, Abraham's got to go and say, are you sure, God?
Yeah.
I mean, I really thought by now that you would have provided something, but I don't see anything. Are you sure?
Perhaps he was hanging on to the promise that God had made to him.
Right, well, see, that's the thing. You know what? God's going to provide. We don't see him questioning in any way. What does it say right in verse 10? Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. There was absolutely no questioning of God here. He just said, well, so far God has not provided someone, so I don't know how God's going to do it, but I got to obey him. Took that knife to slay his son. But then in verse 11, the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here am I. I don't know about you, but I feel like the way he would have said was, here am I. Like, okay, finally, something's happening. You know, a little bit of underlying text there, like, oh, yes, I'm here, I'm listening, I've been waiting for you to call out.
I find verse 5 very interesting. We can just go there for a second.
Absolutely.
Where Abraham even told the two young men, we, meaning he and Isaac, will return with you.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
You know,
Yes, that's true.
He
Yeah.
takes the son in verse 5, and the lad will go yonder, I am the lad will go yonder, and come. So it's implied that certainly both the lad and I will be back here.
Yes. So even with that, I mean, he had full belief. He had full faith in God right then that God would provide. It wasn't just a show, like when he, just to try and possibly calm any fears that Isaac, his son, may have had when he said, wait a second, where's the sacrifice? He had this full faith in him. It wasn't just to ease anything for Isaac. It was what he truly believed, was that God would provide.
Yes, indeed.
He would provide. And at this point we see, let's see, back to verse 12. This is the angel of the Lord speaking. Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. what a point of relief. Even with the faith that he had, that God would still provide him, would provide this sacrifice. I'm sure that just as a father, that had to have been a load of relief off of him hearing that. Saying, you know what? No. Because what I'm seeing here is, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son from me, is saying, look, I remember this, or I know of this agreement that you had. This is the angel of the Lord. This is not God speaking right here. It's the angel of the Lord. I know of this agreement that God has with you.
Yes.
This was just a test.
Yeah. That's right.
And Abraham lifted up his eyes, in verse 13, and looked, and behold, behind him, a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. Abraham went and took the ram, offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah-Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. So after we have gone through that and looked at that as we just did, still, like I said though, kind of more of an overview. We could very easily dwell on this for so much longer, just diving into the prophecy, the amount of prophecy that is in this as well. But just by going and looking at this, I mean, it really brings to light the amount of faith, not just on Abraham, the father's point of view, but also the faith of his son, his young adult son, the faith that he had as well. And then going on, the rest of this chapter is it's talking about the Abrahamic covenant being confirmed. We'll just read a little bit of it. And the angel of the Lord, verse 15, called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned unto his young men. They rose up, went together to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. So, and then it's after that, we see a little bit further on that it's talking more on the lines of some of his family and such. But so what we are seeing in this Abrahamic covenant here too, I don't know, the last time that we actually went to me and my family went to the beach this past summer, as I was sitting there at one point, watching the kids playing in the sand, of course Derek doing his normal. He doesn't go anywhere, especially if there's sand, without some trucks and tractors and stuff. So he's building roads and that sort of thing. And but as I'm sitting there, there was some sand that was on my lap from when I had been in the sand. I was sitting in my chair. As I went to go and brush it off, I brushed off the majority of it, and I looked back down, and I could start to see, at that point then I saw individual grains of sand. And I went and picked up what would have been a very, very small amount of sand. Okay? This would have been, I don't know, probably half a teaspoon or I don't know. But anyways, a very small amount. I stopped counting at 100 grains of sand. Okay? That's where I'm like, okay, that's just absolutely, because this, just the point of when it's talking about God knows all of these different facts, it's just like, that little tiny bit of sand in my hand. Like I said, I stopped counting at 100. And then just look around me. And if any of you know, this was at Hampton Beach. That is a decent sized beach. We were about in the middle of it, that's where we were, so it's just like looking this way, looking that way, and then with where we were, I looked behind me, because it was a good probably 100 feet of sand behind us as well, and it's just thinking about, wow.
Yeah.
And that's what he is saying. This is what part of the covenant is, the promise here, is that he will multiply thy seed not only as the stars of heaven, as the sand which is upon the seashore. I'm just like, just that one beach, and it's just like, it's not just the surface. Ask my son who loves to dig in the sand. That sand just keeps going down. Okay? It's not an inch of sand. There's a lot more. What does that mean? It is impossible for us to even be able to figure it out. And yet, not only does God know how many grains of sand there are, but he uses that as an illustration, saying you would not be able to even begin to count or keep track of how I am going to bless you. Let's see where we are for time. We have a few more minutes. So chapter 23 of Genesis. This is speaking of the death and burial of Sarah. Let's go ahead and read it. And Sarah was 127 years old. 127 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah. Sarah died in that country. The same is Hebron in the land of Canaan.
So was she was only 27, so she could have died before they even had that account.
No, she was 100.
Well, she was 127.
127, but she was only 27. She had
Right.
life.
So yeah. So
Oh, no, that might have been 37.
No, she was 100 when she was 90 when she had ice.
Okay. So
Right.
she
So
could
in
have
37 years. So she was.
died right before.
It could have been right around near her death.
Yeah.
It very well could have been. So yeah, we are not 100% certain. Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. It's right around that time. But it's a possibility that maybe, or maybe she saw it, but maybe wasn't in the best of health either to even realize what was going on. We don't know. We do not know. It says, Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And Abraham stood up from before his dead and spake unto the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. First of all, I want to point out, remember, he is what many people know as a Bedouin, okay? A tent dweller. They don't dwell in one spot their whole lives, okay? They move around as what their flocks or whatever need. So even though Abraham had land that the God considered, the God said was his, in all interpretation of it, and the other people that lived there, okay, it wasn't private property. There was no big fence around this huge piece of land, okay? Other people lived there, other people owned land, but he notices, and he says to these people, he said, I'm a stranger, I'm a sojourner. I don't actually own any land here. I want to be able to bury my wife. I don't want to just throw her in the ground somewhere. Okay? I love her. I want it to be a special place. Verse 5, and the children of Heth answered Abraham, saying unto him, Hear us, my Lord. Wow. Wait a sec, I thought he was just a stranger, a sojourner. They are calling him my Lord. Even to them he was one of what you might call high esteem. Okay? They considered him important. Thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. And Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth. And he communed with them, saying, If it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me to Ephron, the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, which is in the end of his field. For as much money as it is worth, he shall give it me for a possession of a burying place amongst you. And Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even of all that went in at the gate of his city, saying, Nay, my Lord, hear me. The field give I thee, and the cave that is therein I give it thee. In the presence of the sons of my people give I it thee. Bury thy dead. Before we go any further, so here they are. First of all, these important people here that are all gathered together, these children of Heth, they say, look, this one person that speaks here says, I am going to speak for us as a group, everyone here. Whoever you want to use one of our a cave or a sepulcher or whatever, or anyone, you can we will give it to you. Okay, this is the way this is going to happen. We will do it. And Abraham said, well, if I have choice, I am going to choose Ephron, the son of Zohar. And he's saying, what does he ask for? He's just saying, in verse, where is it? Verse 9. He said, he's speaking of this cave. There is a cave that's way off in the end of his field. Okay, so Abraham is not even necessarily talking about this big, possibly beautiful sepulcher that some of these people might have. He's saying a cave. It's something a place where he could still go to, though, to say visit Sarah's grave, a place where it would be able to still be respected, but was not taking much from somebody. And he said, whatever this person, whatever Ephron says that it's worth to him, I will pay him that. Well, then Ephron steps in and speaks. And it says, notice, it says that he says it in front of everyone. In verse 10, answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth. So that way there's plenty of witnesses. He said, no. This, in verse 11, nay, my Lord, hear me. The field I give thee. I'm not just going to give you the cave.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you that whole field. Give it. Free of charge. Verse 12, Abraham bowed down himself before the people of the land. He spake unto Ephron in the audience of the people of the land, saying, But if thou wilt give it, I pray thee, hear me. I will give thee money for the field. Take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. Abraham's just like, please, that's too much. Let me at least give you something for it. Verse 14, Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, My Lord, hearken unto me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that betwixt me and thee? Bury therefore thy dead. So, just if you have come to know me at all, I tend to like certain numbers and that, so I looked this up. Remember, Abraham is a very wealthy man, and from the way this Ephron is speaking, what does that make him? A very wealthy man. In today's terms, in today's weights, and I mean literally today, at the current price of silver, this would only be about $4,500. Okay, that's it. Now, to me, to a lot of you here, $4,500 might be a lot of money. However, let's just choose somebody that's real popular that has tons of money. Trump. What's $4,500? That's probably pocket money. Okay? So that's essentially what we are seeing. That's what this guy is saying. It's pocket money for us. That land is not that important to me. That's why I'm giving it to you. Abraham hearkened to Ephron. Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver, which he had named in the audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current money with the merchant. And the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field, and the cave which was therein, and all the trees that were in the field, that were in all the borders round about, were made sure. Unto Abraham a possession in the presence of the children of Heth, before all that were in the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah, before Mamre. The same is Hebron and land of Canaan, and the field and the cave that is therein were made sure unto Abraham for a possession of a burying place by the sons of Heth. So what he is saying, well, Ephron says, look, you want that? That's not even the prime. It's nothing between us. $4,500. How does that sound? Okay? You know, and like I said, with using that comparison, that would have been, in this case, pocket money. What does it say that Abraham did? Okay, sure. Just weighs up the silver. Here you go. Okay? Showing, I want to do this for you. I was willing to give it to you. You're insistent? Fine. And gives him this tiny little, what would have been to them, a tiny little number. Here you go. Just so that way, kind of to shut up Abraham. Stop trying to push us. Fine, here, just give me this money. And that is where, and then it just, the way it keeps on wording it, it's making us, I believe it's to make us understand that this land and everything on it was truly Abraham's at that point. It's pointing out the cave, the field, the trees in that field, the things that were around the border of the field were Abraham's, meaning that this Ephron would not, or anyone else for that matter, but Ephron would not go in after the fact and say, well, he doesn't use this land other than the cave. I could really use the lumber from those trees. I'll just go, he'll be fine with it. I cut him a deal. I gave it to him for cheap. I'm going to go and take those trees for my lumber. No. Everything in it was his. And that is where we are going to end for tonight, right on time, 7 o'clock. And next week we are going to, we will be able to finish out what we are looking at with Abraham. So let's go ahead and close in prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for tonight. And Lord, I thank you for all of these different accounts, Lord, that you have given us in scriptures, even in the Old Testament here. Just, Lord, how and many times in this special account that we're looking at tonight, Lord, many times there may be things in our lives that we don't understand, Lord, things that might seem impossible, but Lord, you are constantly there showing us in the end that you are truly in control. And Lord, that you are, there's nothing impossible with you. And Lord, we thank you so much for that. And Lord, on that note too, Lord, I thank you for this person that I was able to speak with recently, just going through a lot in their life. And one that has enough church background, Lord, to know the Bible fairly well. I'm not sure of his soul. But Lord, I just thank you that he was able to come to me, and that's exactly why he came Nate, any idea why God would have done this? And Lord, I was able to speak to him. And Lord, I just pray that through all these things that are going on in his life, Lord, if he does not know you, Lord, may this have sparked something where he sees his need for you. Or Lord, if he does know you, Lord, it may spark the fact and bring it back to life that he wants to get to know you better.
Yeah.
And Lord, I just pray for him. And Lord, I pray for these people here in the church, Lord, and just ask your blessing on them. And our brother Tim and his church in Charlestown as well. And Lord, any other meetings and prayer meeting, Bible studies, services and such throughout this week. And Lord, I also pray for the Tuesday, Marion Harris's celebration of life, Lord, that if there is anyone not in attendance, or anyone in attendance, Lord, that does not know you, Lord, what a joy that would just give her to know that through that service they came to a saving knowledge of you. And Lord, I just ask all these things in your name. Amen. Cassie just asked Pastor today if we were going to do that. So no, not yet.
Surviving.
And just the answer for your little bit of trivia.